Evan and I have been friends for a long time. I came to San Diego when I was 20. I had just gotten married. Mike McIntosh recruited me from Colorado to be one of his intern pastors. I was thrilled that Pastor Mike married Jill and I. And then I met Evan shortly after when he was a junior high pastor at Calvary Chapel Vista. I wanted Evan to stick around for a second and share a story that not a lot of people. And it was a story about when God spoke to him. It's like he wrestled with God. I love this story of a night that he just stayed out to get direction from the Lord. You know, sometimes when like the deadline's coming and you make a decision about something and God's not been clear yet, you're really struggling, you need orders from headquarters. And if he would just tell you, you'd follow him. You're totally yielded. But he hasn't been specific. It's very frustrating. But it's also God's style. Keep us hanging at the last minute so we could just cry out to him with all of our heart. And will you share just briefly what was going on and how the Lord spoke?
Brooks just sprung this on me right now. It's totally his style, which I love. But it's not really that. To me, like you just said, you know, it wasn't really a huge deal. Nothing super spiritual of me. Like kind of like taking orders. It was kind of like what had just something to be done. It's probably 3 years ago. Really stirring in my wife and our hearts. About a change in ministry. We're doing youth ministry up at a church in North County, and I've been doing youth ministry for 7 years there at the church, and the Lord was putting in our hearts a desire to really focus on music ministry, to hone in our time on the music ministry and worship ministry and crafting songs for the church to serve bridegroom and recording them in a way that would be accessible, and that takes time deal. So during the last year of youth ministry, we were torn. Long story short, an absent pastor. So I realized if I was going to do music and be a youth pastor, I'd be bad at both. I wouldn't achieve God's, desires with both. So I was torn. Awesome, incredible. So I really started reading a book called The Heavenly Man, which is crazy. Absolutely tore me up. And then I also read this book by Arthur called God's Chosen Fast, which put fasting for the first time ever in uber practical terms. All the biblical fasts, laid them out according to why the place, who fasted, why they fasted, how long was the fast, what they fast from, all of these things biblically. And so I began to, consider what type of fast I need to go on in order to kind of deal with this tearing between two ministries. That I wanted to do both, but I'm only 100% of a man. I'm not 200. I can't clone myself. I can't be good at two things full time. We went up to family camp with our church, and the first night, I started youth ministry for family camp. The first night, my pastor at that time up in North County, he said the reason why we come up on the mountain is because Jesus called his disciples up on the mountain often. And then he had people from the body in the room read verses where Jesus actually involved mountaintop trips of refreshment, where his disciples would go and pray of God together, or Jesus would go alone. But it involved the mountain praying. And this one that slapped me in the face, it was rude awakening, was this one in Luke, where Jesus went up all night. And the point my pastor made with that little verse, real quick, it stuck with me, was that he prayed all night long until the sun came up, and he did not sleep. And then he went down the mountain, and that was the day where he selected the 12. That was the day where he made a giant ministry transition. And that was the day where that ministry transition was involving others, and involving us today, church. And it was huge. And to me, the thought occurred, if Jesus felt the need and the command, and obeyed the command from the Father to spend an entire night sleepless on his knees, seeking the Father for direction and counsel and wisdom and inspiration for a giant choice that would involve others in the ministry. If Jesus felt the need, then it's a no-brainer. This week, I'm on a mountain. And this week, one of these nights, I gotta go sleepless. And it was just like a no-brainer. I kind of got excited about it. I was like, yeah, this is gonna be fun. So that was Sunday night. I'm like, should I do it tonight or should I do it Monday night? And the night was already getting late. And I'm like, okay, Monday night. So Monday night came, and I started explaining to my wife that I was going to do this. She's like, awesome. You're amazing. She was like, I'm like, no, believe me. she was all impressed and everything, but she's like, I don't know if you can. Like, I'm impressed, but wow. It's kind of awesome and amazing, but weird at the same time. Like, so I drove up from the Twin Peaks Conference Center, drove up to Strawberry Peak, parked my car. Kind of afraid of the dark a little bit, but it's kind of scary. But it was super eerie. But I got over that real quick. Read the book of Mark. By that time it was like 1 a.m. And then I just began to just respond to things that I saw about Jesus in prayer. And just respond to Jesus. And I don't know if you've ever experienced a time in prayer where an hour leads to 2, leads to 4. And it hasn't often that type of prayer experience is not like the norm for me by any stretch of the imagination. Like, the day of need prayer, like a day of fasting. All I'm doing is solo with Jesus in a natural closet of forest praying. So I'm praying 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and it just begins to be like this thickness about me. And just a sweetness. And I'm not a touchy-feely existential kind of guy by any stretch. But I am a mystic to the degree that Paul the Apostle was. And the presence of God was thick. And I can tell you, for the rest of that family camp, I drove back down in the morning, and just kind of woke up my wife and went to breakfast. I didn't receive an answer. Brooks, when he asked me to speak on this for a couple minutes, he just said, "Can you speak about the time when God spoke to you through the wind on the mountaintop?" When was that's so Elijah? It wasn't like a wind. I remember when I told him the story, there was a wind, and it was like a wind. Like, I prayed, and then at that moment, it was just maybe coincidence. Or maybe it was just a sweet little God kiss or something. I don't know. But it was. I looked up at the stars and I was praying, and there was like this wind in answer to this. Like, Lord, will I receive an answer this week? And it was just like this. But it wasn't like, oh, that was God. It was just like, oh, that was sweet, Because when God answers through His revealed word, I had the wind at that moment. But that's just me. So the next day came, and here's how God answered. I'm convinced this is how He answered. Not with leave the youth ministry, be a worship leader, or like, He didn't do that. It wasn't like this verse that was like bam, bam. Not initially. That did come. But initially, it was this crazy, broken sensitivity to life. Like, that morning, my son came up and said, "Breakfast time!" He came up and hugged, and I just broke. For some reason, I never cry. But that moment, the morning after that prayer time, I just was a basket case. The next day, something else happened. Like, I was in the youth group, and some kid said a prayer request, and I had to, leave. I was so overly sensitive to the things of God and the things of the Spirit. That whole week was, maybe God had to get me to that tilled ground phase in order for me to read the Word then in the coming weeks and then have that verse pop out. It was definitely a sweet time of prayer that was challenging, but it also was this whole breaking up thing that I didn't know was happening. To me, I guess that was a highlight of my life with Christ. Not I guess, it was. And here I am. Shortly thereafter, the Lord confirmed through several verses in 1 Peter and other places that I was to pursue various gifts and stir up the gifts that God has given, things like that. And to me, in combination with confirmation from those wisdom and counselors around me, was like, okay, I always thought putting down pastoral ministry was a bad thing, but it was time for a season, and I had a complete peace. And my wife was like, my wife felt at home with me singing, but when she was, because we lead worship together. But anyway, so much came together, so much made sense after that coming week. So anyway, be encouraged to take a step up when in that time when you're like, let's seek Him in an intensified way. So, anyway.